Nova Reed stared at the gleaming research station that would be her home for the next year, its crystalline spires reaching toward the violet sky of Proxima. The Human-Ziraxian Scientific Exchange Program had seemed like a dream opportunity when she applied. But now, standing in the artificial atmosphere of the biodome, reality began to sink in. "Dr. Reed," a melodic voice called from behind. "I am designated as your research partner and cohabitation associate." Nova turned to find herself face to face with a Ziraxian. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. 4 arms moved with fluid grace as the creature adjusted what appeared to be a translation device around its neck. "I am Thrix," the Ziraxian continued, bowing slightly. "I specialize in xenobiology, with a focus on terrestrial adaptations." Nova forced herself to breathe normally. Her advanced xenocultural training hadn't prepared her for the reality of sharing living quarters with a member of humanity's first contact species. "Please, call me Nova. It's an honor to meet you." Thrix. The research station's residential wing was a marvel of bioengineering, with walls that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent veins. Thrix led Nova to their shared quarters, explaining the various amenities with patience and precision. "The environmental controls are adaptive," Thrix demonstrated, touching a panel that shifted colors beneath their fingers. "They will automatically adjust to maintain optimal conditions for both our physiologies." Nova watched in fascination as the room's atmosphere subtly shifted, creating a perfect balance between Earth standard and Ziraxian atmospheric preferences. "The technology here is incredible," she admitted, setting down her bags. "I've studied the theoretical papers, but seeing it in person. Your species' capacity for adaptation is equally fascinating." Thrix responded, their head frills rippling in what Nova recognized as a sign of interest. "That is partly why you were selected for this program. Your research on extreme environment microorganisms suggests promising applications for our own colonization efforts." As they settled into their shared space, Nova noticed how Thrix moved with careful precision, always maintaining a respectful distance. The Ziraxian's movements were almost hypnotic, scales shifting colors slightly with each gesture. "I should inform you," Thrix said, their voice taking on a more formal tone, "that our species undergoes certain biological cycles. The next one approaches within 3 lunar rotations. I can arrange alternative accommodations if this causes concern." Nova's scientific curiosity immediately sparked. "Actually, if you're comfortable with it, I'd be very interested in learning more. My research could benefit from understanding Ziraxian biological cycles." Thrix's scales flickered with surprise, head frills extending slightly. "Most species find our cycles disconcerting. Your openness to understanding is unexpected but appreciated." As the artificial day cycle began to dim, Nova unpacked her research materials, while Thrix prepared what they called a welcome meal, using both Earth and Ziraxian ingredients. The resulting dinner became an impromptu cultural exchange, with both scientist and alien asking questions about their respective worlds. "Your planet's diversity of life forms is remarkable," Thrix observed, watching Nova sample a luminescent fruit. "We have nothing quite like your rainforests or coral reefs. Yet you've achieved interstellar travel and mastered bioengineering at a level we can barely comprehend," Nova countered, fascinated by how the fruit seemed to adapt its flavor to her palate. "Different evolutionary paths, different advantages," Thrix responded philosophically. "Perhaps that is why this exchange program is so vital. Together, we may find new paths neither of our species could discover alone." As they continued their discussion late into the night, Nova felt her initial nervousness giving way to genuine excitement. This wasn't just a research opportunity. It was a chance to bridge the gap between 2 vastly different species, starting with the unique relationship forming between herself and her alien roommate. The first signs of tension emerged during their 3rd week together. Nova awoke to find Thrix in what appeared to be a meditative state, their scales emanating a soft bioluminescent pulse that filled their shared living space. The sight was beautiful, but it made conducting her morning research impossible. "Thrix," she whispered, trying not to disturb what seemed like an important ritual. "I need to access the data terminal." The Zyrexians' four eyes opened slowly, their usual violet hue now a deep indigo. "The morning light cycle is sacred to us. It represents the awakening of consciousness. I assumed humans shared similar practices." Nova shifted uncomfortably. "We have various morning routines, but they're more individual. I usually start work early." Efficiency over harmony. Thrix's head frills rippled with what Nova had learned to recognize as concern. "Your species' drive is admirable, but perhaps problematic." The cultural divide became more apparent as they began their joint research project. Nova's approach was methodical, focused on gathering data and running simulations. Thrix, however, insisted on long periods of observation and what they called biological attunement. "You cannot understand life by merely measuring it," Thrix explained during one particularly frustrating session. They were studying the adaptation of Earth bacteria to Proxima, these unique radiation patterns. "You must feel its rhythms, its patterns." Feel its rhythms. Nova couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "We need quantifiable results, not mystical observations." Thrix's scales darkened, a sign of disappointment. "Your dismissal of non-empirical data limits your understanding. Our species achieved interstellar travel by combining scientific precision with biological awareness." The tension peaked when Nova discovered Thrix had modified their shared lab space. Bioluminescent growth covered the walls, creating what the Zyrexian called a harmonic research environment. The modifications interfered with Nova's carefully calibrated instruments. "This is unacceptable," Nova protested, watching her baseline readings fluctuate wildly. "You can't just alter our workspace without consultation." "The environment is as much a part of our research as your instruments," Thrix countered, their usually melodic voice taking on a harder edge. "The bioluminescent cultures provide crucial feedback about radiation patterns that your devices cannot detect." Their disagreement drew the attention of Dr. Venn, the station's research director. The elderly Zyrexian scales had faded to a pale silver, but their presence commanded immediate respect. "Your conflict reflects the very purpose of this exchange program," Dr. Venn observed, their head frills moving in gentle waves. "Two species, two approaches to understanding the universe, neither complete without the other." Nova and Thrix exchanged glances, both feeling properly chastised. "Perhaps," Thrix ventured, "we could establish designated periods for different research methodologies, alternate between our approaches. And maybe you could teach me more about biological attunement," Nova offered, realizing her own rigidity had contributed to their problems. "It might help me understand your perspective better." Dr. Venn's scales brightened with approval. "Growth comes from discord, when we choose to learn rather than resist." Over the next few days, Nova and Thrix worked to find balance. Nova learned to appreciate the subtle information provided by Thrix's bioluminescent cultures, while Thrix acknowledged the value of precise mechanical measurements. Their shared space evolved into a unique blend of human and Zyrexian methodologies. "Your morning ritual," Nova said one day, joining Thrix as the light cycle began. "Would you teach me about it?" Thrix's scales shifted to a warm purple of pleasure. "It would be an honor. Though I should warn you, the biological resonance can be intense for humans." As they sat together in the growing light, Nova felt a strange vibration through her body. Thrix's bioluminescence seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, creating an unexpected sense of connection. "This is how your species meditates." "We don't merely meditate," Thrix explained softly. "We commune with the biological rhythms around us. Even now, your presence adds a new harmony to the resonance." Nova closed her eyes, trying to feel what Thrix described. Beyond her initial skepticism, she began to sense something. Patterns and pulses she'd never noticed before. It wasn't quantifiable data, but it was undeniably real. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. Nova was analyzing data from their latest experiment when she noticed an unusual pattern in the bacterial growth rates. The Earth-based organisms weren't just surviving in Proxima B's radiation. They were thriving in ways that defied their previous understanding. "Thrix," she called out, excitement overriding their usual formal interactions. "Look at this mutation sequence." The Xeraxian moved with unusual quickness, all four arms manipulating different holographic displays as they examined the data. Their scales shifted rapidly through shades of blue and violet, indicating intense interest. "The bacteria aren't just adapting," Thrix observed, head frills fully extended. "They're developing characteristics similar to Xeraxian microorganisms. This suggests a fundamental compatibility we never considered possible." Their discovery led to long nights of shared research, the barriers between their different methodologies dissolving in the face of scientific excitement. Nova found herself increasingly able to sense the biological rhythms Thrix had described, while Thrix developed a new appreciation for human analytical precision. However, as their research progressed, Nova noticed subtle changes in her roommate. Thrix's scales began displaying new patterns, shifting between deep purples and intense blues without apparent cause. Their movements became more fluid, almost hypnotic, and their biological resonance grew stronger. "The cycle approaches," Thrix admitted one evening, their voice carrying an unusual harmonic quality. "I find myself experiencing heightened awareness of all biological patterns, including yours." Nova felt her pulse quicken at this admission. "Is that why the air seems to vibrate when you're nearby?" "Yes. During this time, our species becomes more attuned to potential biological compatibilities. It's intense." Thrix's scales rippled with embarrassment. "I should perhaps maintain more distance." "No," Nova said quickly, surprising herself with her vehemence. "This is a unique opportunity for understanding. Besides, our research is at a crucial stage." Their work continued, but with a new underlying tension. Nova found herself increasingly aware of Thrix's presence, the way their bioluminescence seemed to pulse in sync with her own heartbeat. The Xeraxians' four arms moved with mesmerizing grace as they worked, creating patterns that seemed to draw her in. During one late-night research session, they made another startling discovery. The bacterial mutations weren't random. They were responding to the combined presence of human and Xeraxian biological signatures. "It's as if they're adapting to form a bridge between our species," Nova mused, watching the microscopic organisms create intricate patterns that mimicked both Earth and Xeraxian cellular structures. "Perhaps they are not the only ones adapting," Thrix responded softly, their scales glowing with a warm purple light that filled the lab. "I find my understanding of humans, of you, has evolved beyond mere scientific interest." Nova looked up from the microscope, meeting all four of Thrix's eyes. The Xeraxian's bioluminescence pulsed in a pattern that seemed to reach out to her, creating an almost visible connection between them. "I've been studying Xeraxian biology," Nova admitted, "trying to understand the changes you're going through. The cycle. It's not just about biological rhythms, is it?" "No," Thrix's voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through Nova's body. "It's about connection, about finding complementary patterns in other beings. Traditionally, this was limited to our own species, but your presence, it creates new possibilities." The implications of this revelation hung in the air between them, as tangible as the bioluminescent patterns that danced across Thrix's scales. Their research had unexpectedly led them to the threshold of something entirely new, a potential for connection that neither species had imagined possible. "We should document this," Nova said, trying to maintain scientific objectivity despite the growing awareness between them. "The implications for interspecies relations." "Yes," Thrix agreed, their scales shifting through complex patterns, though perhaps some experiences transcend scientific documentation. The station's environmental systems struggled to maintain stability as Thrix's biological cycle reached its peak, their shared quarters filled with waves of bioluminescent energy that made the air itself seem alive. Nova found herself caught between scientific fascination and something deeper, more primal. "Your vital signs are elevated," Fricks observed, their voice carrying harmonic frequencies that made Nova's skin tingle. All four of their arms moved in mesmerizing patterns as they adjusted the environmental controls. "The resonance affects you strongly." "I've never experienced anything like this," Nova admitted, watching patterns of light dance across Fricks' scales. "It's as if I can feel every cell in my body responding to your presence." The Ziraxians' head frills extended fully, their usual violet coloring now a deep, intense indigo. "The cycle heightens all biological connections. Our research subjects show similar responses: increased cellular activity, synchronized biological rhythms." Their latest data showed unprecedented levels of integration between Earth and Ziraxian organisms. Under the influence of their combined biological signatures, new hybrid structures were forming at the molecular level. "We're witnessing evolution in real time," Nova said, examining the latest readings. "But it's not just the specimens, is it? Something's changing between us too." Fricks moved closer, their bioluminescence pulsing in time with Nova's heartbeat. "Our species never considered the possibility of such deep resonance with non-Ziraxians. Yet here we are, creating patterns that shouldn't be possible." The air grew thick with biological energy as Fricks' cycle intensified. Nova found herself increasingly aware of every movement, every shift in the Ziraxians' bioluminescent patterns. Their research continued, but the line between scientific observation and personal experience began to blur. "The traditional isolation protocols seem inadequate," Fricks said one evening, their scales shifting through deep purples and blues. "Your presence complicates things in ways our scientists never anticipated." Nova stepped closer, drawn by the intricate patterns flowing across Fricks' skin. "Maybe that's exactly why we need to continue. We're discovering something entirely new here." The station's systems registered the spike in biological activity, automatically adjusting the atmosphere to compensate. But the connection building between them transcended mere physical parameters. "There are risks," Fricks warned, their four eyes fixed intensely on Nova. "The depth of resonance during the cycle. It changes beings, creates permanent bonds. Are you prepared for what that might mean?" Nova thought of everything they'd learned together. The merging of scientific methods, the breaking down of cultural barriers, the discovery of unexpected compatibilities. "I think that's what we've been working toward all along, isn't it? Understanding each other at the deepest possible level." Fricks' bioluminescence flared in response, filling the room with patterns that seemed to reflect both their species' genetic codes intertwining. Their four arms moved in complex gestures, creating fields of bioenergy that enveloped them both. "This goes beyond understanding," Fricks said, their voice resonating at frequencies that seemed to touch Nova's very DNA. "What we're discovering here, it could change everything we thought we knew about interspecies relationships." The research station's monitoring systems recorded unprecedented levels of biological synchronization as their energy patterns merge. In their shared lab, their experimental organisms continued to evolve, creating new forms that bridged the gap between Earth and Ziraxian life. "Whatever happens," Nova said, reaching out to touch Fricks' luminescent scales, "we're making history. Not just scientifically, but in ways neither of our species imagined possible." Fricks' response came in waves of light and harmony that needed no translation. They had moved beyond the bounds of traditional research into territory that would reshape their understanding of both their species' potential for connection. The aftermath of Fricks' biological cycle brought unprecedented changes to both their research and relationship. The station's laboratories buzzed with excitement as scientists from both species examined their groundbreaking findings. The hybrid organisms they'd created demonstrated remarkable stability, suggesting possibilities that neither humans nor Ziraxians had imagined possible. "The genetic integration is complete," Dr. Venn announced, their silver scales shimmering as they reviewed the data. "You've discovered something extraordinary here, a true biological bridge between our species." Nova and Thrix exchanged glances, their connection now visible in the way their biological rhythms synchronized. The residual effects of the cycle had left them with a permanent bond, their energy patterns intertwined in ways that defied conventional scientific explanation. The implications extend far beyond our initial research parameters. Thrix observed, their scales now displaying patterns that incorporated elements of human DNA structures. We've proven that deep biological compatibility exists between our species. The research station had become a focal point for both human and Xeraxian scientific communities. Their discovery promised advances in medicine, biotechnology, and interspecies relations. But for Nova and Thrix, the professional achievements were secondary to the personal evolution they'd experienced. The human delegation wants to establish a permanent joint research facility, Nova said, reviewing the latest communications from Earth. They're calling it the Convergence Institute. Thrix's bioluminescence pulsed with pleasure. An appropriate name. Though I doubt they'd fully understand what true convergence means. They had opted to continue sharing quarters even after the cycle ended. Their living space had evolved into a perfect blend of human and Xeraxian elements, much like the hybrid life forms they'd created. The bioluminescent patterns that once seemed alien to Nova now felt like home. I've been offered the position of chief researcher at the new institute, Nova said, watching the play of light across Thrix's scales. They want us to lead the next phase of research together. The Council of Elders has expressed similar interest. Thrix replied, their four arms moving in the graceful patterns that Nova had come to love. They believe our unique connection could guide future interactions between our species. Their personal transformation had become a symbol of possibility. Other human Xeraxian research pairs reported increasing instances of biological synchronization, though none quite matched the depth of Nova and Thrix's bond. We've changed the definition of what's possible, Nova mused, feeling the familiar resonance between them strengthen. Not just scientifically, but in every way that matters. Thrix completed her thought, their scales shifting to display the complex patterns they now shared. We've proven that differences between species can be bridges rather than barriers. The station's viewing dome offered a spectacular view of Proxima's landscape as they discussed their future. The planet's violet sky seemed to mirror the color of Thrix's scales, a reminder of how far they'd come from their first awkward meeting. Whatever comes next, Nova said, we face it together. As scientists, as partners, as proof that love transcends biology, Thrix finished, their bioluminescence creating a cocoon of light around them both. Though perhaps love is the ultimate biological truth. Their research had opened new frontiers for both species, but their greatest discovery had been personal, the realization that connection, understanding, and love could evolve beyond all known boundaries. As they stood together, their energy patterns dancing in perfect harmony, they embodied the future they'd helped create, one where differences became strengths and isolation gave way to unity. The next biological cycle would come, but now they welcomed it as an opportunity for deeper understanding. They had transformed from reluctant roommates to partners in every sense, pioneers of a new kind of relationship that promised to reshape the future of human-Xeraxian relations. In the end, their story became more than just a scientific breakthrough or a personal journey. It became a beacon of hope, showing both species that the greatest discoveries often come not from maintaining careful distance, but from having the courage to draw close enough to truly understand one another.